verse 9, the first part of verse 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Yeah, we moved through chapter 1. And then Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 to 37. Jesus in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount that we started last week with the Beatitudes. All right, so we will start with Isaiah 58. Oh, yep. Chapter, and I forgot my notes, so let me go get my notes. I just realized I brought the sheet, but not my notes.
I always have to stop and my hearing aids in my porch and my glasses goes through your
I think you'd notice if your glasses were there.
If they were not, usually I don't wear them around the house, only if I'm doing reading.
Oh, so you don't need them for driving?
No, I can't go there.
See, I would notice them and get
Oh, yeah, I know.
I don't want her to drive either. That's what I need for reading.
Yeah.
I don't want, we don't want that.
Yeah.
That always,
It's gonna be too hard to get out.
curious like you, so that always floors him when he gives me something to read and I go like this.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Because I can read better without my glasses on.
Yeah, that is.
John, your sweater looks so nice and warm. John,
Oh.
your sweater looks so nice and warm. It looks so cozy, like a cozy sweater. I couldn't stand it today. I haven't not worn a turtleneck for so long that I had to put a scarf on to get something more around my neck.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience and understanding. All right, so let's look at Isaiah 58, starting at verse 3. Oh, why have we fasted, they say, and have you not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for a man to humble himself? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will appear quickly. And your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. All right. What's your verdict? What are you thinking about this pericope?
Is this a back and forth, or is it?
It is a back and forth. Yeah.
So it's, I keep
Talking back to him.
trying. I like our red letter stuff. I don't like most of this.
Sure.
It's like, oh wait,
Sure.
who's speaking right now?
So it'll help if we just go back up to verse 2. Well, actually, it actually starts at verse 1. So, shout it aloud and do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion and to the house of Jacob their sins. So this is God telling Isaiah, hey, here's what you're to be preaching, right? For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways. So this is God speaking to who probably right now? Isaiah the prophet, yeah, to the prophet. And as if the nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager to come, for God to come near them. And so he introduces it, God introduces by saying, hey, prophet, preacher, this is what you're to tell the people. And then verse 3, God is saying, and here's what I'm hearing from them. Okay? So verse 3 is God saying, this is what I hear the people saying. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay? So when you hear it that way, why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Who's the you? God. Yeah. So why have we fasted? Why have we done
You're not
these
even
worship?
noticing. I'm doing this and you're not even noticing.
Exactly. We have humbled ourselves, and you haven't noticed. And then God has a response. All right. So now it's back to God, right? And yet on the day of your fasting, God says, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard and hot. So when you just stop at verse 3, what's the impression that God has about the people in their fast? And what does he mean by fasting?
Well, fasting would be like, they're supposed to reflect on the day of the Lord, you know, and they're
Yeah.
doing other stuff.
Yeah, so it's all about doing things on God's day set aside for worship. So it's an act of worship, right?
Yeah.
Fasting is an act of worship. It's a good thing. But they've kind of said, hey, God,
Look at me.
right,
See,
self-righteous,
remember, it's about them and not about God.
right? And then God's quick to point out, hey, this is how you're spending your day of worship, but what's the reality? What are they really doing in middle of verse 3 and then verse 4? How would you paraphrase what is God observing in the life of his people?
They're hangry.
They're what?
They're hangry.
What does that mean?
When you get hungry, you get crabby.
Oh, okay. So their fasting might involve not eating, but it might involve other things too.
But just not doing the things that they maybe want to do.
Yeah,
And then they're fighting.
And then they're fighting about it. Well, they feel like they've missed out on something.
right?
But on the day of your fasting, you do as you please
And exploit
all your workers.
What does that look? What does that sound like? What do we call that when you say one thing but you actually are doing another thing?
Hypocrites.
Hypocrites. Exactly the word I was thinking.
Oh.
God's basically saying, you bunch of hypocrites.
Yeah, because they're doing what they want anyway, whether fasting or not. They're just
You go about the motions, but you're doing whatever you want, and it's just the opposite of what you should be doing. Hypocrites. What does hypocrite mean?
Saying one thing and doing another.
It
Or
was
believing one thing.
yep, and the word literally means under a mask.
Yep.
Hippo is under, and then hypocritics, it's under a mask. And so it goes to the ancient plays. When plays were done, people, when they changed characters, they would put a mask in front, and then a different character, they would come with another mask, right? That on play acting, right?
Yeah.
So hypocrite is like a play acting, right? Except in a bad way. It's not on stage. This is in real life. Now, what's
Exploit all your workers.
yeah. So you're taking advantage of people. Right? So he's speaking to people who you're supposed to care for one another, love one another, and all they're worried about is getting mixed up. Right? And now here's the thing about hypocrisy. It's easy to see it in who?
Somebody else.
Yeah. It's always easy to see hypocrisy in other people. What's God asking for in this one? To see it in who?
in yourself.
How do we see it in it's not so easy to see hypocrisy in ourselves. That's a little more difficult, isn't it? Yeah. And so the people are starting with God. Hey, God, haven't you noticed what we're doing? God says, yeah, I've noticed. And what you're doing is hypocrisy. And then he gets to verse 5, right? Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Is this what I want from you? Only a day for a man to humble himself? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and lying on sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? And so God is basically saying, I'm not just looking for your worship life to go through the motions and then still do whatever you want, be hypocrites, right? So in each of the questions that God is asking in verse 5, the answer would be assuming what? He's assuming he already knows the answer. What's the answer? No. This is not what I'm looking for, right? This is not what I'm looking for. And so in verse 6, he's saying, now here's what I am looking for. Is it not the kind of fasting that I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke. What does that imply? What are chains of injustice?
Bands of wickedness.
Yeah.
That's what mine says.
Oh,
Not to have to
really?
tie-
Bands of wickedness?
Not to have to tie you up to do it,
Okay.
not to restrain you,
Okay. So here, I
that
think
you do it freely.
it could be. I think one of the things that's going on here is in the Levitical laws of the Old Testament, there was a thing called the year of Jubilee. You know what the year of Jubilee was?
Every 50 years, wasn't it?
Every 50 years. Good job. Every 50 years. So the Jubilee, 7 sevens, 49, on the 50th year of Jubilee. And the year of Jubilee in God's economy for his people living in the new land that he brought them to, into Israel, right? It's their inheritance, was that if you have acquired any possessions from other people, if you've acquired their land, if they become your slaves or their servants because they're paying you back, you're to do what? Return it all. Cancel all the debts. Release all the people who are indebted to you so that economically there'll be restoration back for all the families of God's people.
Loose the chains of injustice.
Yeah.
And tie the cords.
And we know that Jeremiah was big on that. And so Jeremiah is the last prophet right before the exile. Right before God finally says, enough, Jerusalem. They're coming to get you. Jeremiah said, this is happening because we haven't listened. So the people at the last ditch effort, guess what they did? They said, okay, we free all the people from their debt. And so all the people who had built up all this and over years and years and years and decades and generations, we release it. We release you from your debt.
They thought they could undo it.
Yeah, and guess what? They actually changed their mind. They went back and they said, nah, we were just kidding after a few months. And so I think that God's kind of remembering that, right? But this is what I want. That year of Jubilee to be lived and enacted amongst my people. But you haven't done that, right? To set the oppressed free, to break every yoke. That's the image, I think, of what's happening there. Then we get to verse 7. Is it not the fast that I asked to share your food with the hungry? To provide the poor wanderer? When you see the naked, to clothe them? To not turn away your own flesh and blood? Well, who will use words similar to that in one of his messages? Feed the poor, clothe the naked. Jesus. Where? What part of the Bible?
Sermon on the Mount.
Well, it's not Sermon on the Mount, but it is in Matthew.
That's what I was going to say.
The feeding of the 5,000.
No, it's actually a
No,
teaching.
when you
It's the
saw
parable.
when he
Yeah.
Saw me.
The parable, Matthew 25, right? When the Son of Man is going to come and separate
When did we not do this?
sheep from the goats, right? And the goats will be on his left, the sheep on his right. To the sheep, he'll say, hey, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me.
When did this happen?
Yeah, whenever you did it to the least of me, the master will say, you did it to me. And so Jesus very much picks up on that. Now, that doesn't mean you're not saved because you did those things. Matthew 25, that whole story, Jesus says to those who are on his right, blessed are you, for you have received the inheritance. You've received God's gift. But you showed it in the way that you lived, right? By doing these things of justice. and care for others. And then verse 8. When all of that happens, God says, hey, when you start living in that pattern, then your light will break forth like the dawn. What does that imply? What visions, what images do you get like that? The light will break forth like the dawn.
It'll happen just like that.
The resurrection.
The resurrection, yeah. But just the image itself, I don't think it's predictive of anything. I think it's just metaphorical language to describe what? The light, what happens when light breaks forth at dawn?
There's no darkness.
There's no darkness. Bingo. That's what I was thinking, right? The darkness is over.
It immediately comes and it goes from dark to light.
And that darkness is over now because of the light that you're shining in this world. And it brings healing. And there's a Christmas hymn that sounds like that too, right? Hark the herald angels sing. Stanza 3, risen with healing in his wings. And it gets that's from Malachi, where Malachi sees the sunrise, right? And when the sun starts to come over the sun, the horizon, it starts with a ball, but what happens to the light from that ball?
Just spreads out.
It spreads out like this, like wings, right? That's rising. And the image is that brings healing, right? That sun of righteousness brings healing. And very much is what Isaiah is imaging here then. And your righteousness, the middle of verse 8, will go before you. And the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. What's the glory of the Lord again? The kabod of Yahweh. It's that cloud that follows the people. And the cloud that fills the tabernacle and then fills the temple. And when the cloud left the tabernacle, the people got up and they moved.
Because
God was moving. And then when the cloud stopped, they stopped, right? And it filled the tabernacle. That's going to be your rear guard, which is basically being saying, hey, wherever you're going, who's going with you? God's got your back. He's got your back. Yeah. And then when you call, the Lord will answer. And then when you cry for help, God will say, here am I. Here am I. Yeah. All right. So it's a strong word. It's a strong word about hypocrisy. That God is judging that and sees that. But that's not what he's called for his people. He wants us to be people who shine.
Just last week they had on the news, they were looking for homeless people. And they were actually found some in Appleton. They're sleeping out in the cold and I can hardly believe it. Trying to sleep outside.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
Or in a car.
some people, a lot of that is mental illness things. Yeah, that's suffer from. As well as bad choices, but a lot of it is mental illness. All right. Anything else from this passage? Yeah, this is when we got to slow down a little bit and understand who is speaking to who and who is the me and who is the you. And it takes a little bit, but when you break it down, okay, that makes more sense. All right. Good enough? Mm-hmm. Well, let's mosey over to the gospel. Matthew chapter 5. Now I'm going to admission for anybody who really follows the lectionary appointed lessons really close. The appointed lessons was supposed to start at verse 13 through 20, the salt and light, you are the light of the world. I want to use that one for one of my sermons in Lent, so I'm skipping it until Lent. So we skipped the Sunday. We're going down to verse 21. So if you happen to be at a different church or you're watching some other church and they're reading a different gospel than we are, that's why. So admission on my part, no problem. We can do what we want. Right. So we're going to be in chapter 5, verse 21 through verse 37. in the midst of the Sermon on the Mount. But I do want to look at verse 20. Jesus says, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." And so Jesus is saying, hey, I didn't come to abolish the law. I've come to fulfill it. But if you think that you can do it all right, you better be better than the Pharisees. And guess what? You aren't. Okay? So he's not making a teaching by saying, hey, this is the teaching that God wants you to have so he'll love you. Because he already loves us because the king is here. God sent King Jesus into your midst. So we already know he loves us. But he does want us to live in a certain way. And that's what this teaching of the Sermon on the Mount is all about. And for us red letter people, we got a lot of red letters. It's all red letters. So, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with your brother will be subject to judgment. And again, anyone who says to his brother, "Aha," is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger to the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift in front of the altar. First go, be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who's taking you to court. Do it while you are still with him on the way, or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I tell you the truth. You will not get out until you have paid the last penny. And you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out, throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body go into hell. And it was said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for marital unfaithfulness causes her to become an adulteress, and anyone who marries the divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to people long ago, do not break your oath, but keep the oaths you have made to the Lord. But I tell you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one. Whew! Well, this is the gospel of the Lord. Oh, did I end too soon?
No.
Yeah, okay, I thought I did it very first.
37.
I thought so. Because I was just looking at the next verse, it says eye for eye, and it kind of follows that. But yeah, 37. All right. So let's start with y'all.
It's, the beginning, it says you should reconcile with your brother. That means if you have a problem with anybody or they have with you. But that is not as easy as it sounds, because they maybe don't want to hear anything about it.
Yeah, that is not easy.
Both parties have to.
And Jesus will have more teachings later on in Matthew's gospel about reconciling. And one of them will be, before you worry about the speck in your brother's eye, get the log out of your own first, right? That's one that Jesus will say that too. That'll be one of the things. Because here's one of the realities. It's easy to get rubbed the wrong way by people really easily. Right? Not everything has to be an issue, though. There's a proverb that says, it's to the glory of God and your well-being to be like Teflon, to let things slide off, to let things go. Yeah. Not everything can be. But, yeah, there's a wise proverb that speaks about that. Other thoughts or questions about Jesus' teaching here as he starts digging into the Sermon on the Mount? Okay, so imagine you're a first century new follower of Jesus, right? He's speaking to his disciples here. Crowds are in the background. They're listening, but he's really addressing his ones that he wants to form and shape, who have committed to following him, right? His disciples. And he says, you have heard that it was said long ago, do not murder. People will be going, yeah, we heard that. Where did they hear it? Where did they hear that long ago?
The commandment.
10 Commandments, yeah. Exodus 20. Right? Yeah, way back. But then all of a sudden, Jesus said, and anybody who's murdered somebody, but then verse 22, but I tell you, what do you think is going through their mind? We've heard long ago, here's what God has said, and Jesus quotes it exactly. But now he says, but I tell you.
Yeah.
What do you think they're thinking?
Almost blasphemous.
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
Right. Who? What?
How could he say anything any different?
You're going to add on to what God has said? Yeah. So they're thinking that, right? They've got to be thinking that. Now, skip to the end of the Sermon on the Mount. It's in chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 28. And in Sunday morning Bible study, we're going to dig into this stuff a little bit more in a couple weeks. So we're not going to do everything here. But chapter 7, verse 28. You want to read that one out loud, Peggy?
When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, and not as their teachers of the law.
Yeah. So they're already beginning to recognize Jesus is teaching with authority. And they're amazed by it, right? Authority. That word will be used at the end of the gospel.
I think it really has an expanded meaning from what
It does.
we read authority.
So you're right. So at the very end of Matthew's gospel, the very last words that Jesus says is, all authority has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples. Who gave him that authority? God. So he's speaking with God's authority. Right. People are recognizing it in the way he teaches and what he's teaching. And Jesus affirms that at the very end with his great commission. All authority has been given to me. And they're recognizing it already in the way he's teaching. I tell you. Right. This is the Old Testament, right? This is God's command. And what Jesus is doing is saying, hey, there's more to it than the letter of the law, right? So what's the letter of the law? Do not murder. How you doing on that one, everybody?
Well, everybody would think they're doing fine on do not murder.
Yeah, I have never gone and choked the life out of anybody.
Yeah.
I've wanted to, but I haven't.
Yeah.
Now, Jesus is saying, it's the simple fact that you wanted to, guess what?
You committed the crime.
You've done it. That's what he's saying. And who picked up on that, by the way, really well in the Catechism? Martin Luther, right?
Yeah.
Fifth commandment, you shall not murder. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in any way, but help and support him in every bodily need. There's a positive thing too that God wants us to do. And it's not just the letter of the law, it's even with your thoughts. And that's what Jesus is getting at then, right? But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother, well, now who can wiggle out of that one? No, not me. Well, I don't have a brother. Well, he means more than just biological brother, right? Yeah. So, you're going to be subject to judgment. And again, anybody who says to his brother, Racha, anybody else have something different from that? What does the ESV have for that? The NIV just uses the Aramaic word there for contempt. How does ESV read that? Do you have Racha as well, Joe?
Well, we'll be liable to judge it.
Well, do you have,
Does
anyone
what
who
does it
says
say?
to his brother,
Does it say raka in
liable to the council. Whoever says you fool.
You fool. Okay, so they put it as you fool. Okay, so I don't know why the NIV chose to keep it as the Aramaic word rakah, because nobody knows what that means. And it means basically you fool. It's a word of contempt. You idiot, right? So it's just using words to beat people up. Right? You're going to be answerable to the Sanhedrin. Yeah. But Jesus says, no, I'll tell you what. No, actually, you're going to be answerable to God. You're going to be in danger of the fire of hell. And there the word actually, probably in the Greek, was Gehenna. And it was actually, it gets translated as hell. What does the ESV have for that? Is it as hell as well? For the end of verse?
To the hellfire.
Okay, at the end of verse 22, his felt fire. Yeah. So,
Yeah, it says on the pedestal, go to the bottom.
Gehenna, Greek Gehenna. And what Gehenna is, it's actually, basically, it would have been the dump of Jerusalem, where all the refuse got put, all the waste, everything got kind of heaped down into this valley. And it became so vile and awful, it actually began to smolder and burn. And there would be pockets that would just naturally combust because of all the decay happening there. And it became then basically a metaphor for that's what hell's like, right? Being separated from God is like being thrown into Gehenna, into that pit, into that valley of the dump. And so Jesus is picking up on that image and usually gets translated as hell, but that's what it literally is talking about. All right, so then Jesus goes for, okay, but instead of having that, when you do have something against your brother, go reconcile, right? Go to your brother before you bring your gifts, because God doesn't want hypocrites, right? Thinking that you can bring your gift and God doesn't see your strife with each other. He wants us to be reconciled with each other.
Go back to 22, please.
Yes, ma'am, what do you got?
But it says, I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause
Oh, really?
shall be in danger of the judgment.
Oh, okay. So,
What,
Um,
there's a difference.
there
with
is.
the cause or without.
okay, so what my note has here for that is, what version translation do you have?
King James.
Okay, so the NIV takes it out because there are most of the more accurate manuscripts don't have that phrase in it. King James was early English, well, the earliest English translation, and they probably were reading the Greek where the manuscripts left that phrase in. But through textual studies, like we talked about a couple, whatever, I can't remember what we talked about, we don't have any of the originals of the New Testament writings. The NIV, does the ESV have it without cause?
It doesn't, but it
There's a
has to go
footnote.
down to your little notice.
Yeah.
Some manuscripts insert without cause.
So the more modern scholarship is saying that that's probably an added phrase by a scribe somewhere along the line, that the most ancient manuscripts and the most reliable ones don't have it in
It's kind of a shame because it kind of gave them an out again.
there. Right? So it sounds like a scribe wanted to minimize the severity of it and added that. Well, if I have a cause, then
Then I'm okay.
yeah, right. So that's where the King James probably, the translators didn't realize that the manuscript probably was an added scribal thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. I didn't realize that because I wasn't reading King James, and I didn't really look at my footnotes because they're really small and I can't read them without these. So
Excuses.
yeah, well. All right. So going on to the Sermon on the Mount, you've heard it said, "Do not commit adultery." Well, where did they hear that?
Ten Commandments.
Yeah, it's commandments, right? And Jesus says, "But I tell you." So he's doing that phrase again, right? And then he talks about how it's not just the letter of the law of being unfaithful, but it's even in your thoughts, right? And in anything you're thinking, then you're guilty of it as well. And then the whole thing with your eye, if it causes you to sin, and your hand, if it causes you to sin, gouge them out, cut them off, throw it away. Better to enter paradise without that body part than go to hell with it. I think it's hyperbole. Right.
They don't.
Yeah. Jesus isn't actually saying, hey, if your hand sins, cut it off. He's hyperbole. He's avoid it, right? Do everything you can to live the chaste life that God's called you to live.
Or nobody'd have any hands or eyes or
Right.
ears or anything.
Exactly. So
is that where Islam gets their?
I don't know. The whole Hammurabi's law. There was a law code of the retribution. So if something you've done, you should you lose that. So it could be. It's probably not unique to Islam, but probably where some of it comes from. Yeah. Yeah, there is the insurer law where you do lose your hand if you're a thief. All right. Divorce that. If it has been said, anybody divorces his wife must give her a divorce certificate. Well, that's also in the Bible. That's in Deuteronomy 24, right? God, and Jesus will address this later in his teachings in Mark chapter, or in Matthew 19. When the Pharisees ask him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? Jesus says, how do you read Moses? They quote Deuteronomy 24. Moses permitted it. Jesus says, you're reading the wrong part of Moses when it comes to marriage. I'd rather you read the beginning, Genesis 1, right, or Genesis 2. God made them male and female and said to the male, father will leave his mother, be united to his wife, and the two will become one. God's purpose of marriage is unity, not separation. Read that part of Moses and follow that path, and not the way to get out of one. And so, yeah, Jesus is pretty strong about divorce as well. And God is too, right? God has said it in Malachi. He hates divorce. He hates when men jump their wives for the younger ones, which was happening in Malachi's days, right?
Happens.
Yeah. And God says, I hate that. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And then the whole thing with oaths. Again, you've heard that it was said, do not break your oath. Well, that one's a little harder to find the exact reference from the books of Moses. But it's basically God saying, hey, don't let your words stand. Don't swear to God. Don't swear to heaven, which is just a euphemism for God. Don't even swear on your own head, because what? You can't even change the color of your hair. Well, Jesus didn't know about hair color, but you don't control yourself. So just let your yes be yes, let your no be no.
Doesn't that kind of go to the second commandment?
It kind of does, yeah. And our interpretation of it, definitely, yeah.
I'm conflicted with divorce. It happens. It's just
does.
so common.
God permitted it.
A lot of times, one of the parties is completely innocent of whatever, and still he can't go on, or she can't go on to a happy life if she meets someone who cares for her and wants to get married. If she does, then he's considered an adulterer because her husband wanted nothing to do with her. So that just leaves her.
It hardly seems fair.
Yeah, I'm saying. And the Catholic Church was so firm about no divorce. But now I guess it's acceptable.
Well, you got to
They
get an
can take
annulment.
the sacrament.
You got to get an annulment.
But then you can't marry again either. If you get an annulment, what's that?
I don't know. That's
What
where they
is
make
an
money.
annulment?
I don't know. It's where they
Never
make money.
happened.
They make money
It
that way,
did.
no?
It did happen. They have children. I mean, like I said, I'm really conflicted with divorce. It happens so often
And
in
so
my
easily.
own family. So
Hard.
I know it is hard. It is hard. I don't know.
Well, we know none of them are. We want to stop unforgivable.
Right.
We all sin.
It's
It's not like that sin is any worse than all of our sin.
Well, that's right. One sin is
Yeah.
no bigger than the other sin.
They're all sin.
He doesn't, wrong is wrong, and that's
He's
right.
covered them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Jesus is right. Jesus is saying with divorce, it's not God's plan,
Well, it isn't.
but it happens, right? And that's what Jesus would say. Moses permitted it because of the hardness of man's heart. That's what Jesus will say. Right? God knows man's heart is going to be hardened, so He permitted it. And when you send the certificate of divorce, basically allowed that woman to have a restored way of life. But it was people in Jesus or Malachi would say, hey, it's happening for all the wrong reasons now, right? So it was they were bringing their big offerings to God, kind of like, hey God, look at the big offering we bought. Don't forget about that. We just left our wife to go to this younger wife. Don't worry about that, God. Here, just pay attention to the big offering I brought. And God said, I want that kind of offering. I hate divorce. You're not getting it by me, by the way, dude. I see what you're doing. Yeah. And so Malachi was pretty strong on that too.
What about those that were married to how many wives and?
There was a lot of people who had polygamy. Yeah.
Yeah, did they divorce one and keep the other 10, or I mean,
Well,
it had to have happened at some point, wouldn't it?
Well, Solomon had a whole bunch of wives.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't go well for him, did it? With that, no.
But there is forgiveness.
Yeah, of
I
course.
mean,
Absolutely.
anyway.
It's not a
That's
forever
how I feel.
thing. I mean, you'll always have sin, but we all have sin.
Well, yes, of
I
course.
mean, it's not to say, oh, we all have sin.
Yeah.
It's not to take it lightly, but your sins are forgiven.
And this divorce thing, since we're talking, and it's Jesus says, even if you look at another woman with lust,
Jimmy Carter
you've
felt
already
that.
committed.
That was Jimmy Carter, yeah.
Yes.
In his Playboy interview, the Playboy magazine
Oh.
admitted to that.
Yeah.
All right, so
Okay.
let's move on. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. We're not preaching on that one, we're preaching on 1 Corinthians 2. So. That's what we're going to finish up with today. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. We read all chapter 1 so far. Preached on it. So we started off with Paul and this troubled congregation. One of the big problems, the immediate problem that he focused in on in the middle of chapter 1 was their divisions and their disunity, geared around the different followers and which one they thought was better and liked better. And Paul said, I didn't die for you. Christ died for you. You can't divide Jesus. And then last week it was about the nobodies and somebodies, right? Yeah, if you think you're a somebody, don't do that. You're really a nobody. And that's okay, because God used the nobody of this world to make you somebody. And that was Jesus on the cross, right? And that makes you somebody, right? If the king dying for you doesn't make you somebody, then nothing will. And so that's who you are in Jesus. And now he's going to start talking about this idea of what's the most important thing in church to you. That's what he's talking about now. So when I came to you, brothers, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom, as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and with much trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise, persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on man's wisdom, but on God's power. We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age, or of the rulers of this age, who are coming to nothing. No, we speak of God's secret wisdom, a wisdom that has been hidden, and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. However, as it is written, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. But God has revealed it to us by his Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the man's spirit within him? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. For we have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may understand what God has freely given to us. All right. So, a little bit going on here. We're going to, Sunday program is concentrated on verses 1 through 5, but we're going to read the whole thing. So any thoughts or questions, we'll start with y'all. All right, I'm going to start then. So, I came to you, brothers. I didn't come with eloquence or superior wisdom. These were the two driving factors of Corinthian worldviews. We like wisdom, and we like really slick rhetorical speaking. That's what they craved. That's what they wanted. They wanted that, right? And Paul says, hey, when I came to you, I didn't have either one of those things. Now, Paul's not minimizing them. He's just saying, not what I came with. What did I come with? What did he resolve to know amongst them? Verse 2.
I only know Jesus Christ.
And
crucified.
yeah, that's been my message. Just Jesus. It's about Jesus. Just Jesus. So they remember, some of them really loved Apollos. Well, Apollos was a great skilled orator, great speaker. Paul, not so much. Paul was a good writer. He was bright, brilliant. But speaking, he kind of says, I'm not a speaker on that level. He's not minimizing being a good speaker. He's just saying, it ain't the most important thing. What's the most important thing? Jesus. Skip over to chapter 15. Keep your spot here. Chapter 15 is the end of the book, right? Almost the end of the book, or the letter. And he's got to deal with one more issue with this church, and this has to deal with the resurrection. Somebody wants to start at verse 1 and read through verse 3. Big voice.
Now, brothers, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain. For what I received I pass on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures.
And then verse 4.
That he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
Okay.
So, of first importance, what did he come bringing? What's the message of first importance? Christ died according to the Scriptures. Christ rose from the dead according to the Scriptures. It's just Jesus. Why do people come to church?
There's a whole litany.
Right? There's a whole litany, and there's nothing wrong with those. My family goes there. Right? Yeah. Because we like the praise team. Okay. Because we love the organ. Right? Because
the fellowship.
we like the community. Yeah.
People
Good.
of faith.
Love it too. All of those things. Good.
Makes me feel good.
And Paul would say, That's all good. But if that's the reason, you missed it. What's of first importance? Jesus and Him crucified. Jesus and Him crucified. Why is He crucified?
My sins.
To take away the things that separate me from Him. Yeah. That's of the first importance. And it's just Jesus. The pastor, right? So Paul's here is probably dealing with a lot of pastoral issues. You've ever heard the perfect pastor? He's always out visiting people. He's at the shut-ins and hospitals, but yet he's always in the office because if I want to stop in, he's there. Can he be both? No, you can't do. Yeah, right? The perfect pastor, blue eyes, brown eyes. So he's got one blue eye, one brown eye. The perfect pastor, right? Paul is saying hogwash to all of that, right? The perfect pastor is the one who preaches Jesus Christ and Him crucified.
Well, back then a profession was being a philosopher.
It was.
Which are deep thinkers and they just overthink everything.
And so Paul's talking about the professional speaker and then the wisdom piece. So, right, I didn't come with you with eloquence or with superior wisdom. That was the other thing that the Corinthian Greek culture cherished was philosophy, wisdom, right? A wisdom. And Paul's not negating any of those things. He just says that's not the primary thing that I come with. In fact, God chose me probably because I have one mission, and that's of first importance, Jesus. Just Jesus. My message, verse 4, and my preaching were not with wise, persuasive words, but with the demonstration of the Spirit's power. He wants them to know that it's about Jesus. And when Jesus is being preached, His Spirit is working. Which, by the way, we did our little catechism thing on Saturday. The third article, I believe that I cannot by my own reason or strength believe in Jesus Christ my Lord or come to Him. But that He calls me by the gospel, enlightens me with His gifts and all that kind of stuff. And then what He does for me, He calls, gathers, and does it for the whole church on earth. And then in the middle of it goes, and in this Christian church, the Spirit daily forgives me and all believers of their sins. That's the mission of the church. That's the business of the church. We're the forgiveness of people deliverers. There's nothing else in the world that can do that. Right? Nothing else in the world. No other organization can do that. Only the gospel of God and Jesus Christ can do that. That's the one thing that the church can do that nothing else can do. And that's what Paul is saying. That's what I've come to bring. And so he gets to verse 6, and they kind of, we do, however, speak about wisdom. So he kind of piques their interest a little bit. I do got a wisdom here, right? But it's wisdom for maturity, not like the wisdom of the age of this rulers that comes to nothing, right? So I'm not patterning my ministry around how you think it should be patterned, about what makes things attractive to other people, right? I'm not here to entertain, but I've got a wisdom. I do have a wisdom. You seek a wisdom, but it's a different kind of wisdom. And it's God's secret wisdom that's been hidden and destined for the glory before time began. And it all revolves around a king, a Messiah, a God who got crucified. Foolishness and weakness, but if it's God's foolishness and God's weakness, it's better than you'll ever have. So Paul keeps coming back to that theme. And God revealed it by the Spirit. And how will you know it? Only by God's Spirit. That's where he kind of ends with it. Who knows what's in a man's spirit better than himself? Well, who knows God's Spirit better than God's Spirit? Or God's wisdom than God's Spirit? And God's Spirit dwells in who? In all believers. Revealing to us the wisdom of God. Which seems like foolishness to others. Let it be. To me, it's my salvation. It's the glory of God. So we're going to preach a little message this Sunday about just Jesus. Just Jesus. So guess what one of our songs is? You nailed it, Bonnie.
We have practice on Thursday?
Is it both Catholic?
I put it on my calendar, but
I'll send out a text.
Alrighty. I got nothing really more to say about this text, unless you have some questions, and I'll try to answer some. Any of the phrases or ways that Paul worded things that you weren't quite sure about?
It would be a good thing to have in your pocket when, and it's happened to me, I'm sure it's happened to everyone. Well, you know, you would go to church, and you kind of alluded to it. We would go to church, we just don't care to the pastor, we just don't care for that kind of music, and otherwise it come.
Yeah.
I like the praise music, I don't really like the organ.
Exactly.
So is it an organ Sunday, or, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, they only come in.
Yeah,
and that's not what it's about.
yeah.
It's just Jesus.
And then I sin,
We'll
I get
remember
real
this.
judgy and sin.
Yeah. Well, we think it and we brood, but that doesn't help anyone.
Anybody else, any other thoughts or questions on this little reading? Alright, that'll be our last one from Corinthians then. At least for the continued readings, because once we get into the season of Lent, we don't have that continued reading
So-
anymore.
Your sermon is gonna be on Corinthians.
Yes, ma'am. It's just Jesus. That's the sermon. Just Jesus. You'll hear that line a lot, I think.
Well, did Josh have his surgery?
No,
Well,